Hello and welcome to my first ever impressions video. We'll be taking a look at Star Fox 2, which is an unreleased SNES game which actually recently came out in its fully finished state on the SNES Mini. I'm a little bit unsure as to the exact format I'm going to use for these videos in the future, but for now what you'll be seeing on the screen is some general gameplay of the game with minimal editing and cutting while I just talk over it and share some of my thoughts about it. So think of it as being a really informal review, I guess. So, what do I think to Star Fox 2? Well, to get a bit of context, I want to put it out there that I'm no expert on this series and I've actually never played any of them until now, so I'm looking at this game from the perspective of someone who has no attachment to the series whatsoever. So as a newcomer to the series, what are my thoughts? Well, I actually really like this game. It has some cool ideas that are pretty well executed given it's an SNES game, and you really do have to marvel at how far the developers push the hardware to its limit. Despite it being technically impressive, it's also a bit of a shame the game was made for the SNES because it runs pretty badly. At first the frame rate and the general graphics style was really putting me off. It struggles so much in areas with a lot going on, and even when it's running at its full potential, it's still not great. I did eventually adjust to the awful frame rate and extremely dated visuals though, and hiding underneath this ugly surface is the innards of a great game. So the first thing you do is select a character. Fox and Falco are the Mario of Star Fox, they're average at everything and are the best choice to get used to the game. Then there's Peppy and Slippy, who have a lot of health but take ages to charge the lasers up and also have a very slow speed. So these are like the defensive characters, I suppose. Then there's newcomers to the series, Faye and Mayu, who were never seen in the series ever again, possibly because this game was never released, so a lot of its content was scrapped. These are my favourite characters because although they don't have much health, they make up for it with extremely quick speed and a really fast charge rate on the lasers. So these are the offensive characters. You select two characters who you can switch between on the map screen, so this opens up the ability to use certain characters for certain missions and be a bit tactical. The map itself is fairly interesting because it's almost like an RTS game in a way. The way it works is that you click around and move your ship anywhere you want, but as you move, your enemies will also move. But some of the enemies aren't aiming for you, they're aiming for your home planet, Corneria. So this section of the game is basically a balancing act, making you decide whether to try and intercept enemy attackers before they get to your planet, or to play less defensively and go straight for the enemy bases which are scattered across several planets. There's a few different playstyles on top of this map section too. First off, we have space dogfighting areas, which for some reason default to you having a first-person perspective, which is so disorientating and horrible it's unbelievable. Luckily, you can change the camera to be third person in the pause menu, which I recommend you do as soon as you start the game. So these levels are all about simply shooting your targets and blowing them up before they either get away or kill you first. Sometimes you'll be destroying missiles heading for your home planet, or sometimes you'll be fighting a squad of enemy ships. It all depends on what you choose to bump into on the map. There's also a few boss battles which happen in these space areas too. Members of the Star Wolf team will sometimes randomly appear, and these fights are probably the toughest in the whole game. You have to keep calm and shoot a charged up beam at just the right time to hit them, and also make sure to roll at the right time to avoid taking damage from their shots. They're very fast though, so it can be difficult predicting what they'll do next. My favourite part of the game though are the sections where you go down to an enemy base on a planet and are tasked with destroying its core. These levels give you the ability to transform your ship into a walking mech and blast your enemies on foot. The controls here are actually really good and way ahead of the time. Some PS1 shooters don't feel anywhere near as good as this, and PS1 controllers had more buttons to work with too. So using the default controls, the L and R buttons will make you turn, while the left and right buttons on the D-pad will make you strafe. So by using a combination of these buttons, you'll be able to circle strafe enemies and take them out with ease, and it feels quite fluid and satisfying to do this, despite the horrible frame rate. You can choose to do these levels while playing as the standard spaceship, which is cool because it gives the player a choice of playstyles, but I never did this, just because of how much I like the walking mech. The planet levels themselves all follow a very similar structure. You start in an outside section where you need to find a number of switches to make the enemy base accessible, then you go into the base and fight through several rooms until you find the core, blow it up, and then complete the mission. The outdoor bits aren't really focused on very much, which is a shame because the different planets are actually quite varied, which I didn't expect. Some feature underwater areas and some are filled with lava, and these elements could have created some cool hazards and obstacles. But instead they're kind of just there. It makes the planets look different to each other, which is cool, but they could have done more with this. The inside areas all look exactly the same as each other, but do have some different enemies in them, which keeps things interesting. But when it comes down to it, every enemy just boils down to shooting them until they explode, or shooting a little flashy bit on the bigger enemies, which is normally quite easy to spot. The last level variety is a kind of mashup of the dogfighting and the planet levels. In these ones, you'll have to fly up to a massive cruiser ship, and upon getting close enough, a cutscene will play and you'll enter the inside of the ship where you can turn into a walker and destroy the ship from the inside, very similarly to the planet missions. These levels are a little bit unnecessary, to be honest, just because they're so similar to the planet missions, only with a really easy flying section at the start. I feel like what should have been done here is they should have made getting into the ship more of a battle. You could have had to shoot shield generators on the outside of the ship to gain entry or something like that. But as it stands, you can just boost forward and effortlessly enter the ship. That's not to say these levels are bad, they're just a little bit pointless. The last boss is a bit of a weird part of the game, so basically after you've wiped out all of the enemy forces on the map, you gain access to the last boss's base. This is basically just a longer and a bit more complicated walker section where you fight your way through several rooms. When you get to the last boss, it turns out to be a cube with the last boss's face on each of its sides. You quickly defeat this and it escapes into a tunnel. You chase it and then enter a dogfight section where you fight a big armoured mask which is protecting the cube. After shooting the mask's eyes, it reveals the cube and you shoot it for a bit until it blows up and you complete the game. Obviously the main thing here is, why the hell is the last boss a goddamn cube? So far everything in the game has been normal, like a ship or a robot or something like that, so why suddenly change all of that with a floating cube for a last boss? It's almost like they didn't finish the last boss's character model and so just used a cube as its stand-in while they developed the game and then just forgot to replace it with its actual model. It's really weird, but it doesn't feel like it's intentionally weird, it just seems like a mistake. But then maybe this does have some relevance if you've played the first game, I'm not sure. After finishing the game, you're given a rank based on how many enemy forces you defeated and how much damage your homeworld took and some other things, but to get the higher ranks, you're going to want to play on the higher difficulties. These difficulties not only make the game harder, but also give you access to more planets and different bosses, so it's definitely worth playing these if you want the full experience of the game. One last thing I want to mention is that the game is really short. It only took me like half an hour to complete it on the normal difficulty, and bear in mind this was my first time ever playing a Star Fox game, so that shows you just how short it is. So what do I think to Star Fox 2? Well, it's great. It has issues with its graphics and frame rate, it's perhaps a tiny bit repetitive due to some missions feeling too similar to others, but this repetitive nature of the game is negated by the fact it's so short, so never really has the chance to outstay its welcome. The space dogfight levels feel a little bit awkward to control at times and it can be disorientating keeping track of your enemies, but it's not too bad and I never died because of the controls. It has some great mechanics which could have been expanded to make a truly amazing game. The transforming ability in the map sections I personally find to be fantastic aspects of the game, and you can't just ignore the technical achievement of having this running on SNES hardware, it's incredible that they pulled that off. So it's flawed, but if you can see past its issues, you'll find it has more going for it than stuff that lets it down. If you haven't played it and you have an SNES Mini, give this a chance because it's worth a bit of your time.